young black woman begins her first day of work, but soon discovers a conspiracy that could destroy her. When Aisha, a determined young woman, begins her first job at a large company, she quickly realizes that the environment is more hostile than she imagined. Facing prejudice and distrustful looks, she takes on a challenge that no one has been able to solve. But what seemed like a chance to prove herself soon turns into a dangerous trap. Aisha looked into the mirror, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. She put on her best outfit, a light blue blouse, black pants, and comfortable yet stylish shoes. It was her first time having a formal job at a big company, and she couldn't afford to mess up. At 22, this opportunity seemed like a turning point. She knew her family depended on this job just as much as she did. In the mirror, she saw herself as the hope for a better future, but she also felt the weight of expectations. "You've got this, Aisha," she whispered to herself, adjusting her braided hair. Living in a modest neighborhood, Aisha knew life had always been tough. She had grown up in an environment where prejudice and exclusion were daily companions. She had heard and felt hurtful comments for being a young black woman in a society that often seemed unprepared for her. But now, standing in front of that mirror, she saw a woman ready to challenge those barriers. As she arrived at the company building, she felt small standing before the automatic glass doors leading to the impressive lobby. She took a deep breath, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and walked in. As soon as she passed the reception, she noticed some looks. Some employees glanced at her indifferently, while others gave her looks that bordered on disdain. "Good morning, can I help you?" asked a receptionist with a neutral expression. "Oh yes, I'm Aisha, the new employee," she responded, trying to sound confident. The receptionist simply nodded and motioned with her head for Aisha to continue. She thanked her, feeling a bit uncomfortable with the coldness of the atmosphere. Aisha crossed the lobby, observing the well-organized desks, the computers already on, and the employees typing quickly and with focus. Upon entering the main office area, the atmosphere shifted. There was a heaviness in the air, as if her presence was unexpected, out of place. She felt some furtive glances from colleagues whispering among themselves. But she stayed strong. She needed to focus. When she finally reached the manager's secretary's desk, she was greeted by Martha, a woman with short blonde hair and a stern expression. Martha gave her a cold look, examining Aisha from head to toe. "So, you're the new hire?" Martha said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I hope you're ready to really work. There's no room for distractions or mistakes here." Aisha smiled, but it was a forced smile. She knew exactly what was behind those words. Her heart raced, but she kept calm. "I'm ready to do my best," she responded, her voice firm yet polite. Martha didn't reply immediately. Instead, she paused uncomfortably, looking at Aisha as if waiting for her to make a mistake right there in front of her. "We'll see if that's true," Martha finally said before turning to her computer, completely ignoring Aisha. The first day felt like a test of endurance. Aisha was assigned basic tasks, such as organizing stacks of documents and observing the company's delivery system. But what made the day harder wasn't the work itself, it was the environment. Every time she walked through the hallways or entered a new room, she felt the weight of the stares and whispers. She felt watched, analyzed, as if people were waiting for her to fail. Martha, for her part, made a point of approaching with her sarcastic comments. "Are you done with those files yet? Or do you think you'll need more time?" she'd say, smirking. "I'm almost finished," Aisha would reply, trying not to show her discomfort. As the day dragged on, Aisha kept her determination. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but every cruel comment or disdainful look only fueled her resolve. When the workday ended, she felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. As she walked out the office door, she took one last look at the place. She knew that the next day she'd face it all again. But one thing was certain, she would return, more determined than ever. Aisha arrived at the office before the sun was fully up. The sky was still tinged with orange and pink when she passed through reception, determined to continue her work with the same dedication as the day before. She knew she had to prove herself more than anyone else. To her, punctuality was a sign of respect, a way to show she was committed. While organizing her desk, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Martha, once again wearing that cynical smile on her face. "I see punctuality is your strong suit," Martha remarked, crossing her arms and leaning slightly forward, as if analyzing Aisha's every move. "But I hope you have other skills besides just arriving early." Aisha kept her gaze steady but didn't reply. She knew that any word spoken at that moment would be used against her. "Actually," Martha continued, her tone now sounding more malicious, "I was thinking of giving you a special task. Something that none of us here has been able to solve yet." Aisha furrowed her brow, trying to hide her nervousness. "Of course. What's the task?" she asked, keeping her voice controlled. Martha paused, as if savoring the moment before responding. "We've been having problems with some shipments. They've been disappearing before they reach the warehouse. It's been happening for weeks, and no one has been able to figure out what's causing it." Aisha nodded, but she could sense there was more to it. "And you want me to investigate?" she asked, trying to maintain a professional tone. "Exactly," Martha said, smiling artificially. "Maybe you, with your different perspective, can solve the problem." The provocation was clear, but Aisha didn't let it affect her. She knew Martha was giving her this task hoping she would fail, and that only fueled her determination. She spent the rest of the day analyzing reports and cross-checking data. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but Aisha had a keen eye for details. As she investigated, she noticed a pattern in the missing shipments. They always disappeared at specific times on consecutive days. There was something more complex going on, something that could be fraud within the company. Meanwhile, Martha watched her from afar, confident that Aisha was wasting her time. By the end of the day, Aisha didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew she was on the right track. There was something bigger behind those disappearances, and she was determined to find out what it was. Aisha barely slept the previous night. She couldn't stop thinking about the discoveries she had made during her second day at work. The missing shipments were not the result of simple errors. She was sure something more sinister was happening. The pattern she had found in the reports intrigued her. Who was behind this? And more importantly, why? When she arrived at work that morning, even earlier than usual, she felt a mix of anxiety and determination. She knew she was about to uncover something important, but she also knew she would have to tread carefully. The office seemed a little different that day. The same people were there, busy at their desks, but Aisha felt a different kind of attention focused on her. There was something in the air that made her stay alert. Martha was at reception, as always, with her usual smile, but this time there was a shadow of irritation in her eyes. "Good morning, Aisha." Her voice was dripping with false sweetness. "Did you sleep well? You seem to have a lot on your mind lately." Aisha looked directly at her but remained calm. She had no intention of being provoked. "Yes, I slept well. Thank you for asking, Martha," she replied, walking toward her desk. As she arranged her things, Martha approached, pretending to be casual, but Aisha already felt the discomfort that always accompanied her presence. "Did you manage to solve the great mystery of the missing shipments?" Martha asked with that sarcastic tone that was becoming all too familiar. Aisha took a deep breath. She knew Martha was trying to unsettle her, but she wouldn't give in. "I'm close," Aisha replied simply, without giving any more details. Martha raised her eyebrows, surprised by the confident answer, but before she could say anything, Aisha was already on her way to Mr. Anderson's office, the branch manager. Entering the office, she was greeted by the manager, a middle-aged man with a serious but fair expression. He looked up from some papers he was reviewing and gestured for Aisha to sit down. "Aisha, good morning. What can I do for you?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Aisha took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. She knew this moment was crucial. "Mr. Anderson, I believe I've discovered what's happening with the missing shipments," she began, trying to hide the anxiety in her voice. The manager's eyes narrowed slightly, indicating that she now had his full attention. "Go on," he said, leaning forward in his chair. Aisha started explaining what she had found in the reports. She talked about the patterns she had identified, the specific times when the shipments disappeared, and how everything indicated that someone within the company was manipulating the system to divert the goods. She pointed to the documents she had brought with her, showing the evidence. As she explained, she felt the weight of responsibility grow, but she also noticed she was gaining the manager's attention. He flipped through the papers with interest, nodding occasionally, as if he was starting to connect the dots in his own mind. When she finished, Aisha waited anxiously for Mr. Anderson's reaction. The silence that followed was heavy but not hostile. He was thinking. "This is very serious, Aisha," he finally said, his voice grave. "If what you're saying is true, we're dealing with a case of large-scale internal theft." She nodded, feeling a mix of relief and tension. It was good to be taken seriously, but it also meant that things could get even more complicated. "I want you to continue this investigation," said Mr. Anderson. "I'll need more proof, something concrete to take to the regional manager. But you're on the right track. Be careful, it could be dangerous." He looked at her with genuine concern. Aisha agreed, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders as she realized her work was being acknowledged. However, the feeling of being watched didn't leave her. As she left the office, she felt Martha's gaze burning into her back. The secretary was at her desk, typing furiously, but her eyes were fixed on Aisha with an intensity bordering on hatred. As she passed reception, Aisha couldn't shake the discomfort. Martha was definitely planning something, but Aisha knew that, no matter how difficult it was, she wouldn't let that stop her. The investigation was just beginning, and she was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. On her fourth day of work, the atmosphere in the office was even heavier. Aisha could feel the stares of her colleagues following her, as if they knew something she didn't. Whispers surfaced every time she walked down the hallways, and Martha's behavior was stranger than usual. The secretary seemed restless, frequently glancing in Aisha's direction, as if she were waiting for something to happen. Aisha knew she was close to discovering something big. The evidence she had shown Mr. Anderson was just the beginning, and she had already identified more patterns in the reports that suggested the involvement of more people within the company. However, what she didn't know was that a plan was being set in motion against her. Martha, furious with Aisha's growing success, decided to take action. The previous night, she had gathered a few colleagues from the office in a discreet corner, away from the supervisor's prying eyes. These were employees who, like Martha, felt threatened by Aisha's presence. Some were openly prejudiced, while others simply didn't like the idea of someone new standing out so quickly. "We need to take her down before she gets too far," Martha said urgently. "If we keep letting this go, soon she'll be in a position above all of us." One of the colleagues, a short man with a cynical expression named Carlos, crossed his arms and gave a mocking smile. "And what's your plan, Martha? Let her mess up on her own? She seems smarter than we thought." Martha looked at him impatiently. "She might be smart, but everyone has a weak point." She smirked. "We're going to plant false evidence and make it look like she's involved in the thefts." The other employees looked at each other, surprised but also intrigued. The plan was bold, but Martha had already thought through all the details. They would fabricate false documents, associating Aisha's name with the missing shipments, and start spreading rumors that she was involved in something suspicious. Carlos gave a little chuckle, seeming to finally like the idea. "You're wicked, Martha." "I like it," he said, while the others nodded, albeit reluctantly. The next morning, Aisha noticed something was wrong as soon as she walked into the office. People were avoiding her even more than in previous days, and the whispers were more intense. She felt as if everyone was watching her from every angle, but she couldn't quite figure out why. It was as if something was happening behind her back, something she hadn't yet uncovered. Martha, on the other hand, was glowing. She smiled more than usual and always seemed to have her eyes on Aisha, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Aisha knew something was about to happen, but she couldn't imagine what was about to unfold. At the end of the day, she was called into Mr. Anderson's office again. Aisha felt a knot in her stomach. There was something about this summons that didn't feel right. She walked to the office on trembling legs, unsure of what to expect. When Aisha entered the meeting room, the atmosphere was tense. She immediately sensed that something was wrong. Mr. Anderson was sitting in his usual spot at the table, but next to him was a man Aisha didn't recognize at first. He had an imposing presence, with neatly combed gray hair and an analytical look that swept across the room. It was clear that he wasn't there for just a casual conversation. Mr. Anderson gestured for Aisha to sit, and she obeyed, trying to control the growing nervousness that tightened her chest. The silence in the room was oppressive. "Aisha, this is Mr. Collins, the regional manager," Mr. Anderson finally said, breaking the silence. "He's here to discuss a very serious matter with you." Aisha swallowed hard. She felt her heart race. Why was the regional manager there? What could be so serious as to require his presence? Mr. Collins leaned forward slightly, looking directly at her with an air of authority, but also curiosity. "Aisha, we've received some very concerning allegations about you," he began, his voice firm and serious. "There are documents and rumors circulating that suggest you might be involved in the diversion of goods." Aisha froze for a few seconds. Her mind couldn't process the words she had just heard. Involved in the diversion of goods? The accusation was so absurd that, for a moment, she didn't know how to respond. That's not true," she finally said, finding her voice. "I would never do something like that. I've spent the last few days investigating these thefts to help the company." Mr. Anderson looked at her with a mixture of doubt and consideration, but it was Mr. Collins who continued speaking. "I believe you're telling the truth, Aisha," he said, crossing his arms slowly. "But the documents we have suggest otherwise. Your signature appears on reports that indicate involvement in the diversion of goods, and there are witnesses who claim they've seen you tampering with the systems outside of allowed hours." Aisha felt a wave of indignation and shock. Martha. It had to be her. Those false accusations, the fabricated documents, and now witnesses claiming to have seen her doing suspicious things? This was all Martha's doing. "I understand that this seems incriminating, but I assure you, Mr. Collins, all of this has been fabricated. These documents are fake, and I'm certain someone here is trying to frame me. I was investigating these thefts, and I think I'm very close to finding out who's really behind it." The regional manager didn't react immediately. He looked at her with a serious expression, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he was willing to listen. "And who do you think is behind this?" he asked finally. Aisha took a deep breath. It was a risk to speak up, but she knew she had to be honest. "I believe Martha and some other employees are involved. I have enough evidence to support my suspicions, but I need more time to gather definitive proof. The patterns I found in the reports point to someone with privileged access to the system, and Martha is one of those people." The silence in the room was deafening. Mr. Anderson looked at the regional manager, who remained quiet for a few moments, deep in thought. Aisha waited anxiously for their reaction. Finally, Mr. Collins stood up slowly from his chair and walked to the window, looking outside as he spoke. "The allegations you're making are serious, Aisha. Accusing someone without concrete proof is a dangerous line to cross. But it's also true that your work so far has been exemplary. Mr. Anderson has spoken highly of you and your commitment." He turned back to face her, his expression serious. "I'm going to give you a chance. You'll have a few more days to gather all the evidence you need. If you can prove that Martha and other employees are involved, we'll launch a full investigation and take the appropriate measures. Otherwise, the accusations against you will be formalized." Aisha felt a mixture of relief and tension. She had an opportunity to clear her name, but time was short and the stakes were high. "Thank you very much, Mr. Collins," Aisha said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the nerves. "I promise I won't let you down." As she left the room, Aisha felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. She knew the next few days would be decisive, not only for her career but for her dignity. She had to prove her innocence and expose the real culprits. As she walked past reception, she saw Martha, who was sitting with a satisfied smile. Her eyes gleamed with a malice that Aisha knew all too well. Martha was certainly convinced that her plan had worked. "Everything okay, Aisha?" Martha asked, her voice sweet but loaded with irony. Aisha didn't respond. She only gave Martha a firm look before continuing to her desk. She had a lot of work to do, and she knew she couldn't let the provocation shake her. She was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. The next morning, the office was filled with palpable tension. The rumor that Aisha was under investigation had spread quickly, and the suspicious stares from her coworkers followed her wherever she went. However, Aisha refused to be intimidated. She knew she was closer than ever to exposing the real culprit. She spent the next few days meticulously analyzing every document, reviewing every report, and cross-referencing data in search of inconsistencies. If Martha was involved, she had to have left some trace. With each new discovery, Aisha felt she was getting closer to the truth, and indeed, her patience was rewarded. In one of the delivery reports, Aisha found something that had gone unnoticed by others. There were duplicate entries at times when the goods had disappeared. Someone was manipulating the system to make it appear that the shipments had never arrived, when in fact they were being diverted before being recorded. And these false records coincided with the work hours of Martha and a few other employees. Armed with this new information, Aisha gathered the necessary evidence and, that very afternoon, presented everything to Mr. Collins and Mr. Anderson. Both men were visibly impressed with the clarity and accuracy of her findings. The evidence she had gathered was irrefutable. Not only had she proven her innocence, but she had also uncovered the internal theft scheme. Mr. Collins called her back into the meeting room at the end of that day. When Aisha entered, she was greeted with a warm smile. "Aisha, you've done an extraordinary job," said the regional manager, gesturing for her to sit. "Your findings are precise, and we've already launched a formal investigation into Martha and the others involved." Mr. Anderson, who was sitting beside him, smiled as well. "Moreover, Aisha," continued Mr. Collins, "due to your exceptional performance and the fact that you identified such a serious problem within the company, we've decided to promote you to the position of supervisor for the Internal Investigations Department." Aisha could hardly believe what she was hearing. She felt a huge weight lift off her shoulders. She had won. Against all odds, she had proven her worth and cleared her name. But Mr. Collins wasn't finished yet. "As a result of your findings, Martha and the other employees involved in the scheme will be terminated immediately," he announced firmly. "We do not tolerate this kind of behavior within the company." That afternoon, all the employees were gathered in the office for the official announcement. Mr. Collins stood in front of everyone with Aisha by his side. "I'd like to thank you all for your hard work up until now," he began. "But I'm here today to share some important news. Thanks to Aisha, we've been able to identify and resolve the issue with the missing shipments. She has done a brilliant job, and as a result, she will be promoted." Applause echoed throughout the room. Some clapped sincerely, while others were more restrained, but Aisha didn't care. What mattered was that she was finally being recognized. "However," Mr. Collins continued, "we've also discovered that some employees were involved in illegal activities within the company. Martha, you and the other responsible parties are being dismissed effective immediately." The shock on Martha's face was undeniable. She was paralyzed, unable to respond. Aisha's victory was complete. As Martha left the office, humiliated and defeated, Aisha felt, for the first time since she had started there, that the weight of prejudice had been replaced by respect. She had earned not just a promotion but something much greater, her dignity and recognition.